Hello.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Between Shelf and Screen. That was so embarrassing of you.
It was. I should never do that again.
Yeah. Please stop intimidating our audience. Anyways, so today we are conversing with friends. Yeah. I always have to relate it somehow, okay? You don't have to walk off the screen. I get it, but like, come on, we're in this together.
No.
Hey guys, welcome back to Between Shelf and Screen. It's just me today.
Did we even introduce ourselves?
Oh no. I'm Ryan.
I'm
I guess.
Alex.
And who do you relate to the
Alex.
most in this books?
In this book? Are we going to start that right off the bat?
Yep.
Or do you want to get a description in?
Nope. Who do you relate to the most? We'll just give a vague, and people won't know what's going on.
True.
Just
Honestly,
actually don't even explain it. Say a name.
I actually do like that question, though.
Okay, fine. We'll discuss this later, but we will talk about this book. So we both kind of didn't really know what we were going into.
Yeah.
We didn't really read the description in all that depth, and it kind of doesn't really explain what's going on, but these two exes, who are still friends, work together on like poetry and present this as a team, and they get interviewed by this woman and meet her at a dinner with her husband, and they just kind of form a relationship, and we're following the kind of drama behind it and
Become
just life in general.
pretty good friends with them.
Yeah.
Isn't Melissa supposed to be like she was writing a piece on them, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's how it started, and I think she writes for a magazine. I want to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
She kind of reviews art, I think.
Yeah.
Different forms.
And you don't really learn until a little bit into the book. I would say like maybe towards like 40, 30 pages in that they're like an older married couple and they're very rich. They're like not older in the sense where like, oh, they're in their 50s, but like older than Frances and Bobby, which are both 21 college students. And
so there's a dynamic there too that plays a part because we have these people just growing up and experiencing the world on their own and that don't really have a way to sustain themselves, and they're kind of interacting with people that have built their life up and are on the higher half, like the almost 1% of people. And so that's an interesting concept that it discussed in this book.
Right. And I mean, I feel like they should have included in the description, and this isn't really a spoiler, I don't think. And if you do think, we'll leave a big gap so we can cut it out. But they end up like this conversation with friends. Like you just think that like they have like this friend relationship, but it ends up like Frances and Bobby end up having like legit like relationships. Like I guess what's the term for it? Adultery relationships. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
It was not what I was expecting going into this, and I also thought this was friends that have been friends for a while.
Yeah.
I did not realize that they would have just been meeting at the beginning.
But it's very new, and also like you start out where like Frances and Bobby were a relationship for a hot minute, and they broke up, but they're still besties,
Which has its own dynamic there.
Yeah.
Because you can tell that there were a lot of emotions behind.
Yeah, and they kind of all just like tucked them away, and they're like everything's fine, and like they barely even like each other, but they're best friends.
Right. It was more of a gradual kind of thing. Like they weren't ever fighting all that much in the beginning. It was just you could tell that there was jealousy or just some sort of emotions where like you wouldn't describe a friend the way that Frances was describing Bobby, and Bobby wouldn't act the way
a good friend would to Frances. Like she was very it was from Frances's perspective for a while, but like I got the vibe that she was very like self-centered.
Bobby was?
Yeah, just like very like didn't really care about like people other than herself.
Right. And I think we kind of discussed part of like how Frances was describing these people, and I came to the conclusion that I think she was biased and she had a lot more going on that we couldn't really tell at the beginning, so we were taking things at face value, but throughout certain people change, but I think it's less about them changing and more about Frances understanding more about how life is and how these people actually are.
Yeah.
And she just finds out more about herself. And so
Yeah.
it's
And
an interesting book.
yeah,
And I think
definitely.
all the characters played a good part
They
into
did.
this.
They're not necessarily likable.
Right,
Like
definitely
they're
have
not
their issues.
they're not unlikable. They're just characters. They're like not bad or good. They're just kind of neutrally figuring things out for themselves.
They're too real,
Yeah,
which
no,
is
it is so okay. So I wanted to say this too. This is like a romance book. I think you could classify it as that. I think the author wouldn't agree. She would want to say it's something else, but I
it
think
has romance is a big part. I guess it's
yeah,
not
it's like
romance genre.
it's like a focal point throughout the whole
Yeah.
thing, and like has to do with I guess a lot with like the discussions of monogamy, polygamy, and just like how that works into people's lives and the jealousy that you'll encounter. And like generally, if I were to hear this book explained to me that way and be like, "Do you want to read it?" I'd be like, "No, not at all. I don't want to read this at all." But I'm happy I went outside my comfort zone with this genre because I ended up really enjoying it.
Yeah. Who would you actually suggest this to? Since you are kind of in the place where you wouldn't have been the target audience, but now that you've read it, you have more of a idea of both sides.
I'm trying to think, and maybe, honestly, like if I'm thinking of crowds as far as just like genre fiction, maybe people who like true crime, and not because anything really criminal goes on in this book, but it's like it makes you kind of analyze the characters like very critically, and like you're trying to figure out what's their deal. And like it's very similar, like we were talking about, to the book
Caroline
You.
Katniss's, yeah.
And like the way the characters interact is very much so like chess pieces, and they're all just testing each other, and they're trying to like gain the upper hand in a lot of like social scenarios. It's like very interesting in that way. So I think maybe people who like crime mysteries or like that sort
I
of
think
stuff.
psychological thrillers
That too.
is what, now that you kind of mentioned that, I'm like, oh yeah. I think people that like psychological thrillers, since it has that psych part of it,
Yeah.
you don't really get the thrill in the same sense, but I think if you wanted to step out of your comfort of reading that kind of topic, or that genre, this would be a really good book because you really dive into the psych behind certain actions and behaviors. And there's a lot to really digest about this main character, too.
No, it really is. And honestly, it's a drama. Like, it's very mundane drama.
Yeah.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this goes in the category of either romance or literary fiction.
It's literary fiction, yeah.
Yeah. But I think a lot of people will consider romance as well.
Yeah, it's a main aspect, and I think same with her other book that neither of us have read.
And I'm open to reading it. This is opened a whole new thing for me.
Normal People, I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard really good things. This is very popular on Sad Girl Talk, I think, Book Talk.
Oh yeah.
But I know it's just popular on Book Talk and BookTube in general. We aren't the first person to cover this, I don't think.
Definitely not.
No, I've been looking forward to reading this book. I was the one that brought this to conversation with my friends.
So that one was good. I like that one.
So, yeah, was a little worried that I was going to be let down a bit because I hyped it up so much, but I really wasn't. And
no, I think it lived up to it.
If you don't like slow burns, this probably isn't for you.
Yeah.
You don't really know what's going on in the first third, but it's a fun ride.
That's the thing. Like, I mean, if you like character-driven stuff, you're definitely gonna like this, because it's 100%. So like the thing that might throw people off, which threw me off at the beginning, and like I honestly, the first 100 pages, it's so mundane, and barely anything is happening, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I didn't even know where it was going at all.
No clue. Yeah,
I was still just like, I'm just flying through this.
Yeah, and she was at a farther point than me at one point, and I was just like, is something gonna happen? Like, I'm like, don't get me wrong, I'm not enjoying it, but at the same time, Like, is something gonna happen? Is there gonna be a plot here? Like, at
Yeah.
least a little bit of a plot?
I was a bit worried because I knew this wasn't going to be your thing, and I
Yeah.
was like, "Uh oh, now it's your turn to be upset about the
Yeah.
pick." Like I've had my time.
No, but yeah, I'm glad I stuck with it. And
Yeah.
like her writing style is like, it's very approachable too.
Yes.
It's the kind of literary fiction where like she will throw in like I guess like a $12 word every now and then, but at the same time it's not so overwhelming. And her prose are like, what I feel like it says it on the cover. Somebody described her prose as like very precise, and I think that's a perfect way of putting it, because she describes the situation they're in like precisely. Does it say that on the back for you? It might say it with
I'm
mine.
looking at it, but I definitely agree.
Yeah.
And I kind of actually had something to talk about because she, like a lot of literary fiction books, adds some $12 words in there. But I was going to say that, or I made a note that her writing almost itself is like poetic, but in a more natural way. It's not
Yeah.
like a poem, and it's not adding in a bunch of fluff or descriptions, but just the way that it flows is poetic like.
Yes.
And she doesn't have that much fluff, but you still feel connected with the diction that she uses.
Yeah.
And she doesn't overuse those $12 words.
Yes.
And instead uses them at the right time and like the right moment and feeling that the main character was in at that point, because when she's upset, she typically doesn't use it. It's more basic, straight to the point kind of words. But then when she's more intellectual, I feel like she was using that and analyzing other people's behaviors was when she'd throw in those bigger words.
Right. And okay, so the exact words, I found it. The exact words of, I think the New Yorker says, a writer of rare confidence with a lucid, exacting style. Rooney's natural power is a psychological portrayalist. Sorry. That last word's weird. But yeah, like
Yeah.
basically what that guy said exactly is how her writing style is. And you know, if that's always what kind of makes me shy away from like literary fiction a lot of times, because like I don't normally use those $12 words in regular speaking. So like I know a good bit of them, but like when I come across one, I'm just like, I gotta open my phone and look up this word every 2 seconds. Like
Yeah.
with Lovecraft. Like if you guys ever read Lovecraft or ever have, you will understand. It's like every other word you're just like, oh, what is that one? But I like him at the same time. But
Well, that's why you get the books that say like the translated version, basically, like in like with the emojis and all that, since
Yeah.
you would understand that more, right?
yes.
Yeah, the emojis really help.
Emojis are so important. That's how like our grandchildren are gonna write books.
Have you seen the Shakespeare book that was just like it was, or someone made, I think it was Romeo and Juliet, and they made it into emoji and like texting, and like half of it is just straight emojis, and it's so embarrassing.
Oh my god.
But it's like I can't stop thinking about it. It clearly made an impact on me. I worked at a bookstore, and I'm still to this day. I'm like, yep, that one book.
The text prose. Not the text
It's so
prose.
anytime. I feel maybe bad about saying this because I get it's like in now because everyone knows what texting is, haha. But anytime I see a book that's written in text format, it makes me cringe so badly. It's
Which
just
with this one, I feel like they did well. There's a lot of emails back and forth.
oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
emails are also different. Like
Yeah.
didn't Katniss also have emails a lot because of
Yeah.
but
Hers were a little bit more cringy.
true,
Yeah.
but it also fit the
Beckalicious.
characters. It wasn't like I am going to write a whole story in just emojis and text that say like just spell out R as like the letter R as R.
Yeah.
No. Oh my gosh. Anyways,
But let's get back on track.
I guess or whatever.
I'm trying to think of where we were.
We were
But-
talking about who we would suggest this to and like
Oh,
the
yeah.
writing style.
Yeah, I think you know, a guy, probably some guys like me who like read fiction. They're probably only into like sci-fi, horror, fantasy, very very manly stuff, and we can never ever like a romance story. I would say give it a second
Well,
thought.
that's why you don't have any romance in your life, right?
Yes, that's particularly the reason. I don't know how to love. No, but I feel like if you wanted to get into the genre of maybe like romance, this is probably a good gateway.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
I dabble in definitely more romance than you. And I know, I added some romance to the list because I want to see your take
Oh
on
boy,
it.
yeah. Actually,
Like, why can't I
I'm down.
remember? Jane Austen is what I was trying to think of the whole time. Wow. I'm embarrassing myself because I actually do really like Jane Austen, but couldn't remember her name.
Oh,
But I have
Jane.
added her to the list, so you will get a fair taste of those $12 words and romance.
Oh yeah, and we're gonna get that with like descriptions. You know, never mind.
No, it's very classy.
Is
This
it?
is like old, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Jane Austen was an author like way long ago when
Okay.
like ankles were the hit.
Well, no, I even said that like at the beginning of this year. I was like, I'm so stuck in horror and sci-fi. I just want to break out of my bubble.
It's kind of scary
Yeah, I can't get
that
out
you're
of it.
stuck in horror.
Yeah, I'm just scared all the time. No, but like that's just my genres, and that's the ones that I really really enjoy, and I'm happy that I'm getting a little bit outside that. And definitely, I mean, like when I say do those two genres, I'm including literary fiction a lot of times because
Yeah. You
I-
never really dabbled in it all that much before.
oh no, literary fiction?
Yeah.
No, I definitely did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I don't even know if I consider that a genre. If I'm gonna be real.
What?
Well, I
I
get
think it's big now.
I get like what it's trying to encompass, but at the same time, like the genre almost means nothing to me, just because like all literary fiction means to me is like it's very highly praised.
I think it's less about praise and more about like that it makes you think. Well,
Google's talking.
oh my god, that scared me. Anyways, she had her own opinions, I guess. But I think it's more about what it's making you think about the topics that it dives into. While like a just classic fiction book doesn't necessarily have to make you think. Like it can
Right,
just
yeah,
spell
it's
everything
just a
out.
story,
Yeah.
And yes,
So I think it does need to be
like and yeah,
differentiated.
like what I meant by that was like critically acclaimed. So like people like critics will come out and be like, "This is a work of art," you know, and like. Which, like, some of the literary fiction that I read, I'm like, yeah, definitely is worth that title. But then some, like The Road, were just like...
I knew we were gonna dog on it at some point.
Yeah.
I was
like,
just wondering who would bring it up first.
Yeah, like, some of them just come across as, like, pretentious, and you're just like, really? Was this just artsy, or was this just the author just being very vague and being like, hopefully they interpret something out of this?
Yeah. I think that's less about the genre, though, and more about a kind of cheap way of writing.
Yeah.
And...
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to dog on the author himself too much.
No, not at all.
Because it connects with some people. And we were actually reading reviews.
Just cackling.
Yeah, some of them we were, but there was one 5-star that kind of like put in a different perspective.
Yeah.
Which basically said that he could relate to the kind of nightmare that this story
And he likes to
felt
think,
like.
what would I do?
Yes, and
And-
putting in the questions that were mentioned, even though to us it kind of seemed more baseline, like, oh, carrying the light, like, whatever.
Yeah.
You just, like, survive. I don't know what's wrong. Like, I watched The Walking Dead. I could do it. But it put into perspective of, like, more of the father point of view, and I was like, okay, still doesn't make me
Yeah.
like the book, but
But then there was that one line that he
Oh my
wrote where he's
gosh.
talking about the... Okay, he literally says this. He calls the night depthless and autistic. He calls the night autistic. What does that mean?
it's not an adjective. Like,
It's not an adjective. To be autistic is a mental disability.
and yeah,
It's not an adjective.
It-
And he called the night autistic. what does that mean? And we saw 2 different reviews. One that was praising the line, saying like, this is brilliant prose, and then another person was just like, did he just call the knight autistic? What does that mean?
Yeah, seriously. And even people that liked the book are like that were commenting on some of them like, can someone please explain what that mean and why everyone loves it? Because like this is talked about in like actual reviews, like articles that talk about his book. They bring up that line. It's like he was pulling stuff out of his ass.
And that's definitely what it felt like.
Yeah. Also, pause. Why is music playing? Can you hear
Yeah.
that? Alexa, off. That is the most terrifying thing.
I don't like that. That's weird. We're keeping that in.
That was.
Well, we got off track anyway.
Yeah.
We did. Sorry,
So-
guys. Ghost troubles. Anyways.
We always in the beginning. That's like what the introduction is all about.
Yeah.
I guess we'll bring back the question. Who do you think you most relate to?
Oh, should we do our rating first?
Oh, I guess that's kind of important. Kind of
Yeah.
what you guys are here for. What's your rating?
I would say.
Would you?
Yes, I would say.
I wish Holly wouldn't.
Stop. But no, well, okay. I say pretty good. That's my rating. And I haven't really said my scale yet. It goes really bad, okay, good, really good. And I say pretty good, right in the middle. Of
Okay.
good and really good.
So like technically a 4.5.
Yeah. Yeah, because from start to beginning, I was invested, and I really enjoyed just like the characters and the different dynamics they had, and then like also just like things that made me think about. So
Yeah.
I guess it is literary fiction.
I guess you were thinking for once.
Yeah, they was talking about
Finally
like
got
how
comment
the-
below that you're proud of him and like while you're at it, you know. He deserves some thumbs up for thinking.
Yeah, and also he was talking about she added in that line about the knight being autistic, and I was like, that's perfect.
Perfect, yeah. Okay. There's going to be a fan that just completely.
Yeah. You posted that video last night, and I looked today, and I watched a little bit of it. I'm like, oh man, I wonder how many views. 3.
Hey, that's more than when I saw it, which was 0.
That's true. But anyways, yeah, that's kind of what I thought about it. I enjoyed it. What about you?
Yeah, I actually would honestly give it a 4.5 too. I was sitting at a 4 up until the very end, and oh my gosh, I can't wait to talk about the ending because it like is so different and not what I was expecting, but also kind of what I was expecting. But the way that it was just finished and worded, I was like, wow, that is somehow the perfect ending.
Yeah,
And I don't know how else to describe it.
I was very satisfied with that ending.
Yes. Like, for the first time in a long time, not that I haven't enjoyed books and that they've had good endings, but I haven't felt that, like,
Satisfied, right?
yes.
Yeah.
And so that bumped it just, like, straight up to a 4.5.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. And I
Yeah.
say what distinguishes this from, like, I guess just a 5-star all-around great was just that, like, at times I'd read it and I was just like, I guess it didn't, how do I put this? I guess it was just a genre thing. Like, I
Maybe.
think that's what, like, if it would have bumped it up if maybe, like, the stakes were a little higher, or if there was something something else at play that was just a little bit more, like, that would draw me into it.
Yeah.
Because at points, like, it's so mundane and the characters are interesting, but at the same time, I could always put this book down and be like, okay, nothing that serious is going to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, the stakes weren't that high. And
Where
I guess I'm used to reading books where, like, things are important. You know what I mean?
Because feelings aren't important.
Yeah.
No, I get what you're saying. I would say that mine's also not a 5-star because even though I absolutely would reread this at some point and I'm excited to watch the show after this, just to kind of see how it plays out.
Yeah.
I'm not like dying and begging on my knees to read this again, like immediately after.
Yeah.
Where I've had books where I just am like, yeah, I can't wait to go through this again and kind of dive into every single part and really see what things I might have missed the first time go. Well, this, I'm like, I'm excited to reread it at some point, made me think again, and there probably are some things I missed, but I get the idea throughout because it's not as high stakes and there's not as much going on. I think that it's just not something that's like at the top of my list again, you know?
Yeah, definitely. But yeah. So I guess we can go into that question now.
Yes. So we'll repeat it for like the third time.
Yeah.
Who do you think that you relate to the most?
I'd say a combination of maybe Nick and Francis.
Yeah.
Because Francis, I really related to the fact where, like, she thinks things are certain ways, but then she gets put in scenarios and then flip flops, does the opposite of what she's going to do, think she does. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and for Nick, I guess just I can relate to him a little bit, not because of like cheating on my wife part. Just
Well,
because,
you'd have to have a wife first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
But I relate to him in the sense where like he, in these like scenarios where like Francis is really like going all out on him, and she's like being really rude. He's just kind of like sitting there and like not getting that upset about it. Because I've had a lot of times where people get super upset, and I'm just kind of like, all right, man.
Yeah.
Like,
I can definitely see that part, but you definitely have more of the out there that Nick did. Like you're not gonna just apologize for every little thing. Like you'll stand up for yourself.
Oh,
You know
yeah,
your self-worth.
I'm not a pushover, but in the sense like if I'm not that passionate about something, I'm just like, okay.
Yeah. I think.
I guess I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Could we just end this conversation?
Yeah. I see that. I see more Nick than Francis, but Francis is just a.
She's kind of a blank slate. She's very easy to relate to.
Yeah. True. Because it's just it dives into a lot of things that an everyday person struggles with.
Right.
I'm trying to think. I really don't know who.
Bobby? Melissa?
I think I have a bit of Bobby in me and a bit of Francis. Like I think I'm a middle ground between them two, and then the other half is more Nick that I would relate to because I think I'm the same way, and I don't try to overthink an argument. And
Yeah, I have no. If I think I'm in the wrong, I will just apologize.
yeah, I feel like I can understand when I have done something wrong. Maybe sometimes not immediately, but like
Yeah,
I will
not to a
come
fault,
back.
not to like a pushover stance.
Yes, and if I'm like confident in something that I think was right, I'll stand up for that. Which it seems like he was never confident in all that much, but I do like understand like, hey, this person's coming to me and at least upset. Maybe I didn't even do necessarily the wrong thing, but if I upset them, I need to apologize because that was not in my intention if it wasn't. So
Yeah, I feel like Melissa is the most unrelatable one.
I would 100% agree, and I think she's also the one we know the least about too.
Yeah,
So
and she
she's
just seems
interesting.
like even as she kind of explained her situation with Nick afterwards to Francis, even then I was just kind of like, wow, you're still kind of like unlikable. You still kind of suck.
And I think that was a kind of a part throughout this whole book. Or she was like the character that we technically really were supposed to dislike.
Yeah.
Realizing at the end, while Bobby kind of seems more straightforward at the beginning, like all around, they all had their faults with Melissa and just couldn't really overlook it. Nick, the least amount. And you wouldn't think that Bobby would because at the very beginning, this isn't a spoiler, she was like infatuated.
With Melissa.
But things change and you just kind of start to see more sides of Melissa throughout up until, or like throughout the book very slowly, and then at the end it kind of all hits you.
Yeah. And I felt like Melissa in a way was just kind of cold. Like, and also kind of like a little bit greedy. Spoiler alert.
Yes, spoiler. Turn this off if you don't want to hear, because we want to start talking about
Yes.
more in depth of the characters, specifically Melissa. So,
Yes.
if you haven't read the book, you should probably turn this off. And we highly suggest that you should read it.
Yep.
Just saying.
Definitely.
Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're
There you
leaving
go.
us.
There you go. She fitted it in.
Yeah. So, anyways, what you were saying about Melissa?
So I felt like she was not only cold towards Nick and his situation and how he felt, but she also was just kind of greedy. Where like she wanted Nick and she wanted him as a husband, and she knew that he wouldn't leave, so she just kind of like stayed in the back burner of the relationship. She's like, I'm kind of disinterested in him now, but I know when he's gonna be there when I want him. And like to me, if there was an antagonist, she would be the one of the story.
Interesting. I wouldn't disagree because, as I mentioned, she was kind of a central point for a lot of the issues that
Contention.
people had. Yeah. And so I wouldn't disagree with that part. But I don't know if she was really she was partially greedy, but I think she was more wanting the power. So I guess greedy for control over it, and she even stated
That's a
at
good
the
way of putting
end. Yes, I think that how I'd explain it is that she was greedy for the power and control over the relationship, and she admitted that at the very end, kind of talking to Francis, and said that he was kind of an easy person to control.
Yeah, to push around, I guess.
So she was
submissive to a fault. That's what he called her.
Yeah.
Call him.
Yeah. So it was. I feel like she really had a facet or just like disguise, and she had like this other part of her, and she really didn't know how to handle emotions. None of these characters did.
Yeah.
But I feel like she would kind of just blow up out of nowhere, and then the next second she was like, Francis, but are you like okay? Like when she'd start getting upset, and I was like, you like didn't like her a second ago.
Yeah.
What's the deal? It was maybe they were trying to. They hinted at like a mother-daughter kind of relationship because she, first of all, is older and more of an influence and has been more in the art world and kind of helped develop a little bit of Francis' career. But they even said like one time, I think, Melissa said that she loves all her children, referring to all Bobby, Nick, and Francis. And I was like, you're kind of like in a relationship with.
Yeah, it's kind of weird how you can take a story essentially about an older guy having an affair with a college student and kind of spin the story in a sense where he's arguably the most likable character.
True.
It's kind of weird how that happened.
Yeah, definitely. And I think he had his issues too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I could see how he could be very annoying to deal with.
Yeah, because he would apologize for everything to a fault, where it's like sometimes just like add something more than just apologizing for every single thing that might have been wrong. And I liked the parts where he actually would kind of stand up, but then sometimes he would take it too far, and I was like, oh my gosh, these people don't know how to control anything.
Yeah, they're
still learning.
There's no just straightforward communication.
Yeah, especially Frances.
Yeah, she's the worst at it for sure.
She was giving straight mixed signals.
But somehow I disliked Bobby the most the whole time. I just thought she was aggressive and opinionated and just like wanted to force her will upon everyone.
See, I disagree, and I didn't.
That stayed pretty constant for me.
I didn't appreciate her at the beginning, but I think her image or the way that she was talked about through Frances's narrative, it changed a lot, and I think we got to see more of the true Bobby at the very end, where she really didn't think that highly of herself. It wasn't because she had this big ego and thought everyone should believe what she believed. I think she just has a lot to say, maybe at a certain point her fault, but she's
Well, she
just
wants
trying
yeah.
to bring up other parts and debate people, which I know is not fun. Like, I've
Yeah.
had people that will debate every single thing.
Yeah, no,
And there's a point where you can't deal with it.
yeah, no, it would just be exhausting. I feel like I'm looking at it like arguably like no, not arguably. She is a very well written, interesting character that's very well done. But I'm thinking in the sense of like being friends, and I would not like being friends with Bobby. And well, I think it's because she has a little bit of narcissistic tendencies, and like she's not full blown because there's parts where she's just like she puts down her mask and she's like, hey, look, like it's not that big a deal. She'll go like up to Francis and be like, you always think all your friends are special. It's like, I'm not special. And I was like, I at that point too, I was just like, oh, I see, with her a little bit, but like, just that whole sort of facade that she puts up, and just like how she has to be super aggressive and opinionated about everything, and just can't like not be high strung about every little thing would just exhaust me.
Well, I think it's a defense kind of mechanism as well,
Oh yeah.
because as we mentioned, none of these characters know how to handle their emotions. Therefore, they all respond in a defensive way, which is all shown differently throughout
Yeah.
each character. And her defense mechanism is just kind of being the loudest person and the one that has the most to say.
Yeah.
And I think it also was exaggerated because Frances actually really liked that about Bobby.
Yeah,
Because
which
I
is
think
like,
she.
I mean, I don't know. I guess when you're younger, maybe
Well, I
you,
think
you like that.
it was because Frances and Bobby were foils. Like, the Frances had really nothing ever to say to the conversation. She was very the one in the shadows, and she just analyzed every little detail, kind of like playing chess. And this was even brought up by Melissa, saying like this first time that they met when they had dinner at Melissa's house, Frances portrayed herself in a way of just being almost too cool for the situation that started to create Melissa insecurely
Yeah.
debating like, oh, is this couch not actually like good for the room? Does this not work? Is this like dorky? Whatever it was. And I think that's like kind of the opposite of what Bobby is, because Bobby will straight up tell you if there's an issue and you get it at face value, while Frances might be thinking these things, might even not, but you don't know, and you start to portray that on yourself.
Right, and that is, I mean, depending on how you mix with people, that is arguably more frustrating, for sure.
What, Frances?
Francis, yeah, and I get that. That's totally valid.
Because she couldn't ever express anything
Yeah.
she was actually feeling, which
Yeah.
was her own. She was struggling with a lot of things that were just
Yeah.
not really discussed or.
Yeah, well, I guess what frustrated me the most about Bobby, not necessarily how the character's written. I feel like I need to say that every time. Like, I would really like how she was written.
Yeah, let's
She felt
clarify.
very real.
All the characters did feel very real.
Yeah, but
Realistic.
like the most frustrating part about Bobby was just like whenever she had like something that she was feeling and like she like wasn't able to express it, she would turn it into like an essay about like how like you're being like misogynist or something, and like it was just like, girl, just like explain how you feel in the situation. Don't turn it into like a history lesson.
She did always analyze everything and try to relate it back to what could have caused this at like a very root.
Yeah, like at like a systemic societal level, and it was
Yeah.
just like, girl, like just explain how you feel and communicate. You don't have to. You don't have to.
Wait, I don't have to relate it to the patriarchy and.
Yeah, no, like, because there was that one time, and like specifically, I thought this was like a really well done way of putting it, because she said, Frances calls out, I think Bobby for being jealous of Nick because Nick has Melissa and she's really into Melissa at the point, and then Bobby just walks out because she's really pissed that Frances said that, and then like 2 days later, Frances was just like, "Hey, I'm sorry, we should talk," and then Bobby sends like a massive email to her basically saying like it's very misogynistic and very like what was it, prejudice that you'd think that like me being a lesbian is just going to be jealous of a straight man. I'm like, oh my god, how can you say you're jealous without saying you're jealous? This is how. Like,
And it was again kind of avoiding her actual feelings and more of
yeah,
like, oh, you think I'm this way. And that's how everyone discussed any issue. It was like, you think I'm like this. And it's like, just say what you're thinking right now, not what you think the other person is thinking.
yeah, like it's just so much insecurity built into everything, which is genius.
Yeah, it
But
was
like,
well done.
but like, yeah, that's how the characters can like be their own distinct ways, very infuriatingly, and it's well done.
Yeah, and I think this was like not the kind of situation I ever would have thought about in general. Like I never would have placed the affair kind of thing going with a rich older man and a young college student to then like open up into this polygamy like
Yeah,
thing. It was so not what I was expecting, but also you're. I don't really know if you can expect that.
yeah, it's so
And it
bizarre.
was so well done, and it was just so creative.
It really was.
Genuinely.
Like every single interaction with all of the main characters was like so well thought out. And there's definitely not I don't think you can really say there's a plot at all. It's just
Besides just kind of the affair and where is that going?
yeah, and
That's-
like it has its ups and downs, but it's never a linear plot of like it does the rising fall in action. Like
Yeah.
there's none of that.
There wasn't really a climax.
Not a climax either. Like things just happen and you're sitting
Frances can't say the same though.
there. Yeah.
I think
And-
she found.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, at the end, okay, here's a good question. At the end, do you think any of them had been changed for the better, or are they basically right where they started?
I think Frances had a kind of an enlightenment, which was an interesting touch. That
Yeah.
was so odd, like her
yeah.
experience with the church and the Bible that she read throughout,
Right.
and how she related it to Bobby. Such a weird and like just odd thing.
And she,
it didn't.
I loved the constant digs she would take at like Jesus. I was like, she's like, Jesus said this, and she's like, I didn't like that.
Well, I think it was more of how the person like Matthews or
Oh yeah.
those
Yeah.
were describing Jesus, and it was like, I didn't like this part as much. I
She's
didn't
like
like
so
this part.
cryptic. Just say what you mean. It was so funny coming out of Francis'
Her mouth,
mouth.
yeah. True. I did. It also kind of fit the story. Like it didn't
Yeah.
feel weird that it was bringing in these
No, yeah,
kind of
it
things
was perfect.
in the enlightened moment. But I do think I think Frances changed, for the better, or is on an uphill kind of part of her life, because I think she did realize like, hey, I can be at least a little bit more vulnerable, and it doesn't always completely end. Like I think she was always scared of I could say one thing and it ruins everything. And once things kind of fix, like when she made up her relationship with Bobby and with Nick as well, she realized I guess it's not all that straightforward. And so I think she was going down a better path. I think Nick was better as described, with him going through depressive episodes.
Better in relations. I would say he's better in relation to how he interacts with Francis. That's literally it. He's in the same boat.
His relationship with Melissa was also doing better, but I don't think he changed as a person. I think he just was better. Like he wasn't in a depressive episode and
Right.
found more in life that kind of brought him out of that and helped him get through this, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't think he fundamentally changed as a person. I don't think
Right.
Melissa did. And I don't think Bobby did. I think that the change that was shown was just Frances understanding more of how she felt about Bobby and less about Bobby changing as a person.
Yeah. Less about Bobby, less about Nick, less about Melissa, more so just how Francis viewed it, and I guess her ability to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, at the end of it, although it was perfect ending because like it basically starts right where they started.
Yeah.
But it's
they're
so
starting
perfect.
over.
Yeah, they're starting over, and like you can tell it's gonna go through its ups and downs, and it's gonna be a whole mess going throughout it. And all I could think was At the end of this, I'm like, man, polygamy, not for me. Could not do that ever. Sounds so stressful, but do them. You know.
They literally will be,
Yeah,
yeah.
they will be doing them.
Yeah, I felt like it was. I'm trying to. Let me come back to the ending. I do want to discuss more about Nick and Francis's relationship more, and maybe I'll be able to better word how I felt about the ending, because it wasn't exactly as if they were starting over.
Yeah, not exactly, but pretty much. You know.
I'll rain check.
Yeah, rain check on that one.
But how did you feel like I guess we'll discuss the first half of the relationship before he tells Melissa. So like when they were really just fighting all the time, like how did you feel about them working together?
It felt like they were just kind of in like in a weird sort of honeymoon stage.
At the very beginning?
Yeah, where they were just kind of like doing and not thinking. And then Nick was constantly overlooking just how combative Frances would get and like how non-communicative she was, and but like at the same time I think they were just so happy like just like finding like a connection with one another that they were just kind of
Or just a connection with
riding a
anyone.
high. Yeah,
Because they didn't
yeah.
have that, yeah.
They're just riding a high, and like they weren't thinking at all. And then once she figures out, then that's when it gets a little bit complicated, and they both kind of see each other in a different light, and I guess the relationship kind of loses its fun aspect.
When Melissa finds out?
Yeah, like and then it just becomes more casual, and then they kind of fade off and revert to their own ways.
Yeah. Because I thought that, like, the beginning, maybe not the very first moment, because they were very much, like, puppy love of, like, ooh, this is kind of secretive, kind of fun.
Yeah.
Want to see where that goes. You know, texting all night long, whatever. But I think once she actually, like, went over there, like, it became very toxic very quickly because they just, like, she wasn't communicating with him and was definitely developing feelings very quickly. And she also wasn't asking kind of like, what is this all going to be? And wasn't expressing like, I'd appreciate more of this, like compliments and words of affirmation, everything of that sort.
Affirmate me.
And he wouldn't do that. And then she'd get mad because he wasn't doing it.
Yeah.
And then the second he said the slight nicest, what?
Just
the
like
second he said
basically joking.
Yeah, the second he said something that was slightly a compliment, she would be like infatuated again, and it was very up and down. And I was like, wow, this is like kind of wrecking Frances in the sense that she was just like her emotions were all over the place, and I think it honestly was like tearing her down a lot because we see she really always had issues with communicating and just problems in life that she wasn't really addressing, but it definitely took a spiral, which I guess content warning, I'll leave in the description if you've gotten this far, but there are like mentions of what's the word I'm looking for, self-harming, and that kind of was
from her father and her a little bit.
So she kind of spun down a really unhealthy path.
Yeah, spiraled for sure.
Yes. And so I was like, wow, I really want this to end.
Yeah.
This is not good for the either of them too, because she was very combative and just trying to tear him down with her.
Yeah.
And then when Melissa found out, I felt like the relationship got better. Like they weren't so, because a little bit more opened up, which is what they needed. Like they needed to be more open and honest with each other. And now that that was out of the way, and Frances could admit, like, and I think she did right before, say like, I love you and you clearly don't, and whatever. Like once he finally found out what he appreciated, or, you know, realized like, hey, I need to fix this, it fixed a lot for a while, up until she
Yeah.
started being defensive again.
Well, yeah, like at first, like that was like kind of going back to my point. Like they were just having like fun and like they were just
Yeah.
like living in the moment in a sense. And
Yeah.
then once it kind of became official, they reverted back to their own ways. I feel like, and they just kind of
Yeah.
shrunk back into themselves. And then it started going sideways. And I think that's just kind of the cycles that they're gonna go through, like especially how it ended. Like I feel like they're just gonna continually go through these cycles until either the marriage ends or
Do you think the marriage will end though?
absolutely,
What?
absolutely. I mean,
I don't think so. If you can get through that, and I feel like Melissa
it'll
knows how
get
to play a game, and I think she's expecting.
yeah, but at the same time, like I don't know. I guess I'm just aggressively monogamous. I can't imagine a marriage being the same and or working after that. That's so crazy.
I don't necessarily think that the polygamy will last
Oh
still,
God, no.
but I don't think that they're gonna divorce. I think he will never divorce her, as she
She
kind of
will do it.
explained.
Melissa will do it,
If it happens, it would have to be
and she will
her.
do it.
I don't think so
I
because
she will do it.
she has found the person to control, though.
That is true, but at the same time, she's gonna get bored of it.
But I think she kind of views or relates to Francis as much as she also dislikes Francis.
Yeah, they're very similar.
Yeah. And I think she takes it part as like her losing him, but in a sense also still controlling him because he keeps coming back. And Francis is just a version of her. So he's kind of just like admitting he has a type.
Yeah.
And so I don't think she feels insecure in the sense that.
No, not at all.
So I don't think that
I
it
don't
would
think she's
end
the
on
jealous
that.
type either, but
Well, I think she is jealous, but not insecure about it because
yeah.
she knows he will come back. But she's like, why can he like quit already and just realize like I'm the better
Yeah,
one?
yeah. I just can't see it continuing. Like, I mean, at least like I'm thinking of any real life examples I can think of as far as like marriages that I've heard about that were like this, and no, I don't think it works. I don't think it works. If you're seeking other partners, I feel like the relationship is going to end.
I mean, maybe in real life, I don't know. I feel
In
like in
the
the way
yeah.
that these characters are acting, I don't think it will. But real
Yeah.
life, yeah,
But
it's
this
very
felt like real life.
That's true. Like it's not the characters weren't unrealistic, but they played a part, and I think they will continue going down that same
Definitely.
sense that we've already seen it in marriage and from that
Yeah.
initial
And I watched an interview about uh, from the offer
offer.
from the author Sally Rooney, and like she like the interviewer was talking about like polygamy. It's like he goes, "Were you trying to make like a statement about polygamy, or like what was like?" Were you trying to make a statement about love? Like, what was it? And then she basically just said, like, not really a statement. She was just exploring what love looks like outside of, like, the traditional monogamous relationship, basically. Like, she was
Yeah.
just looking at it, like, through that. She's like, what does love actually look like when it's not expressed in, like, just two people together? And I think she did that really well. But at the same time, I don't know. Just looking through my lens, and then like I guess this is just me being a part of the patriarchy, but monogamy.
Yeah, that's kind of embarrassing of you.
Yeah, monogamy for me is like where it's at. Like you know what I mean?
Well, I think she did express love in not only the not traditional way, but also just different forms of
Yep,
like
that's literally yeah.
Melissa loved controlling people.
Yep.
And I think she did love him in a sense because he was very attractive and blah, 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 blah.
She definitely did love him, yeah.
But she also, we saw her love of control. We saw kind of, I don't know, we just found out other things that also drives these people kind of through their love of it. Like Bobby debating and being just blatantly defensive but also outspoken. And this also like showed the love that Frances had for this kind of behavior. Just all around, there was a lot of love and just a lot of hate, which is pretty close to it too.
Yeah.
Like the jealousy ties back in with love. And so it wasn't just about the relationship and the polygamy and everything like that. It was also just
Relationships in general. Yeah, that she also mentioned that too, like
with
with
objects
the
and
family
yeah.
and whatnot. Yeah, it was intensely complex, which is, I mean, like, that's just so real.
Yeah.
Whether you're in a monogamous or polygamous relationship, it's so complex.
Yeah.
A
And
relationship of any type.
yeah, which I guess that kind of goes into the end because this is kind of Frances's final point. Her final point is that it's not going to be straightforward how she's always expecting because she always got in her head and trying to just play this game of chess with people's minds and not really actually expressing just straightforward what her emotions were, but just like, I'm going to say this and I expect him to respond in this way or else it's wrong. And so when Nick explains his desire for immediately after their first kiss and waiting for her, and she said, like, it's not, everything's complicated.
Yeah.
Like, this really was all that this kind of centered on in the end.
Yeah.
And I think that really tied in everything together as an ending should, and also did leave it open, but I think it was less of repeating and more of like this newfound thought or this newfound idea that Frances had, like, really put into perspective that, like, she can do this again and it can be okay. Like, I don't think that this is the same path of that they went down.
Definitely not. It's going to be a more healthy way forward, but at the same time, it's going to be messy as hell. And
because they still have a lot to work on, but I think everyone's in the point of, maybe not Melissa, but I think everyone else is in the point of improving and understanding one another.
And I think the biggest point I took away from the end is just like as far as like relationships go, whether they be like romantic or not, they're going to be insanely complicated and messy, and you just got to roll with it and like try to communicate as best as possible. I think that's the whole point she was trying to get at with that end, especially.
Yeah. I mean,
like,
that's Frances' whole character, is like kind of showing you what not to do.
Yeah.
Especially when it's an affair.
Yeah, I mean, any other relationship that she would have done that with would have ended so much worse. Like,
True.
literally
and any other person.
Yeah, like, literally any other relationship would have been, like, just terrible. But, like, they chose the right people to have affairs with, I guess. No, I mean, hold on. Frances and Bobby chose the right people, the right married couple to go after.
Yeah. Yes.
Because, wow, like, just the fact that they were able to be like, or Melissa was just like, I'm not mad at you. I was like, okay. All right, then.
True. It was that whole email sequence. I want to dive into that, but first, I want to also say that last scene when Nick also was like realizing he has to, like, things are complicated and he has to kind of change his ways because, as Frances said, like, she didn't appreciate not being complimented or felt
loved.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
And he really put into perspective that, like, he's had those feelings but just didn't know how to express it. And so even though it wasn't even, as he said, a compliment per se, it was like, I think one of the most affectionate things he has said and could have said is just like his immediate just almost giving himself to her, which is very in character, of just like waiting for hours at their party it was his wife's birthday party, right?
Yeah.
And he dipped out because he was waiting for her to come back. Not even just like for her to come up, but he was afraid of missing her if she did like come upstairs and he wasn't in his room waiting for her. And I was like, I wasn't even the biggest fan of Nick. Like, he was not a good boyfriend. They were just not great together. But that was like, it's like, wow, I'm kind of like tearing up from this. This is really sweet.
Right. I thought he was like throughout. I don't know. Maybe this is just me, but I thought that
Yeah,
like
you
Nick.
and your man stuff.
I thought he was just like a really kind person.
I think
Like he was very nice.
all around, I think he was the kindest of the whole group.
Yeah.
But I think he did have the fault of just
Having zero backbone.
yeah, and that's not always what you want. You don't always want to hear "I'm sorry" just for everything. You know, I want reasoning or see improvement or whatever, or even like when things weren't necessarily wrong. I mean, Frances was so difficult because she would get like mad, and even other things she'd be mad at that wasn't involving him, she'd start acting, upset or would be upset, and he would ask, and she wouldn't just say like, "Oh, it's not regarding you, like this is what's actually bothering me." It was like, it's nothing. And it's like, you really don't know how to respond except I'm sorry for whatever I did, but
Yeah.
so I just found that annoying because I'm not the biggest fan of that kind of behavior, but it
No,
wasn't
me neither.
it wasn't
Don't take
harmful
this as
for a person.
yeah. Don't take this whole podcast as me condoning Frances, because in real life she would bother me so bad. She would get on my nerves.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and even Nick's behavior, like I'm not.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, even these are also all our opinions, anyways,
Yeah,
too. So people
it's
probably
fun.
feel a lot stronger about.
It's
certain
fun.
things.
I feel like we're fanboying a little bit. We're just kind of like, who would we like be friends with? And, like, who are we?
Who would we dislike? What would we do in this situation?
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, that's what reading's all about.
Yeah.
It's just, being in a different kind of environment. Playing things out before or without having to actually have the consequences.
Yeah.
But I do want to talk about Melissa's email because that was just you could feel the emotion traveling or throughout, like changing as she was writing this up.
Yeah.
The author did such a good job with that.
So good.
Because it felt
I was
like it
very
was
impressed.
a legitimate email that would be written about it, even though it was kind of silly that she's like, "I'm not mad that you're having an affair." That was the most unrealistic part, but not in a bad way. It was just, that's just how
Yeah.
the story was supposed to go.
And she wasn't not mad.
True. Sorry, I'm trying to find, there it is.
Do you have a specific part?
No, I just want to kind of look it over to see if there's something. Because there were...
The end really was interesting to me, because the whole time she's just kind of like pooping on Nick, and then she's just like, it's kind of messed up that you did this, but then at the end she's just like, it's really cool that you gave him this, and like you're making him a better person, and I was just like,
It was such a twist.
if I would have got that email, I would have been like, what is this?
Right.
I would have been shell shocked. I've been like, do I respond? Do I like what happens? And then she goes, I think Frances is just like, let's meet up and talk. And then Melissa's like, okay.
Yeah, well, she invites him to dinner, and she's like, yeah, let's do dinner. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Or she also then said, like, there's a lot to think about here. And I was like, no, because she starts by saying, I'm not mad, but also my husband is, like, not what you expect and actually awful for you and me. And he's just a terrible guy, basically.
And then as she's describing what he went through and everything, like, I was just like, oh, I'm definitely on Nick's side. Like, I was just like, wow, you're just affirming that you're just really cold.
Yeah, she was dogging on him.
Yeah.
When she also had an affair, it was just...
no. I was just like, you have no... I was like reading that, I'm like, Melissa, you have no reason to be mad. Like...
Well, I mean, she absolutely had a reason to be mad about the affair, but then she starts with,
but
I'm
no,
not mad about
she's
the
also
affair.
like, yeah, but then I had an affair. But, like, that was, like, because I had my reasons. And I was like, okay, your reasons probably worse. I'm gonna be honest. It's crazy. It's so bold.
But also, her reason, she was like, they were being completely distant in her situation, while, like, he was kind of getting a little bit better on his own, I think. Because he was out of the institution that he was in. And so wouldn't it be worse that things were kind of on the better side or growing a little bit? And then he was like, actually, I want to have an affair. Well, she was like at the very low of their relationship and had an affair. Like, I'm not saying either are good because they're both wrong.
I would agree with you, but his low meant him going to a mental institution. It's like if you can't be there for your husband in that scenario and you literally cheat on him, that is villain behavior.
Right. Absolutely.
That's not cool.
And I'm not supporting either situation. Let me clarify that. But like they both had their rights to be angry.
Sure. But she started it.
It's always the woman, okay? The patriarchy, am I right?
Gosh dang patriarchy.
She was just an instigator throughout all of this.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
In a hidden way because she just hid behind so much.
Yeah, and then like not to mention, I think before even Francis and Nick got together, I think Bobby and Melissa kissed. And it's like, wow, you're just cherry on top. You're going right back to your ways again.
True. It's like, it's not just a situational thing with her.
Like, I feel like she just gets bored. And then she's just like, well, this new exciting thing sounds like fun. Let me just ignore Nick's.
I mean, she gets what she wants. She wants power. She gets what she wants. And she knows that she would get away with it, which is just sad.
Yeah. That's like, what she did to Nick feels the equivalent of me when, like, women cheat on their husbands that are like on deployments. It's like
100%.
It's like, okay, well, you knew what you were signing up for. Like in her scenario, you knew what you were signing up for when you married the guy because like you knew that he wasn't altogether like the best mentally.
Yeah, and he wasn't gonna be there. All the time too.
Yeah, and then when things get bad, you're just like, okay, well, I guess I'll just cheat. Like it. Objectively, I feel like I get a lot of people behind me on this opinion. Yeah. Like, Melissa was the worst.
True. She was the least changed by the end. And she's also the oldest and less likely to look at herself. But I think there were parts where I was able to, what's the word? Overlook or like see a better side of her. Like when they did have that, Francis and her had a phone call, and they were both attacking each other in different ways.
And it was just very subversive.
And then Francis kind of shifted and apologized, acknowledged her wrongdoings, and just like expressed she was having a bad week. And Melissa immediately switched to, instead of saying, she goes, like,
what? Which is probably what I would have done too.
Right. Like she was like, what is wrong?
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't confusion. She was genuinely like, what's going on?
I thought it was more confusion. I read it with her just going, what is going on? You know?
Yeah,
that's how I read it in my head, because she was just still mad, and she's just like, oh, now you're going to apologize, you know?
I thought it was more of that motherly type of thing they tried to portray her in, because she was caring in certain instances too before she found out about the affair, when she still didn't like Francis for good, or not good reason. A little bit of a good reason. The way that she started to make Melissa insecure and portrayed herself in their house and whatever it was. She didn't like Francis, but she still was like, I'm going to be here for you. Like, I can tell you're upset about this. Like, let's talk about it a bit. And Francis was dismissive as always. Yeah. So they never really gained a friendship.
No, yeah. Honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, none of these people are good friends for each other at all. They, like, if I was one of these characters in any of those situations, I would have probably like stopped myself like halfway through and be like, you know what? I should probably like distance myself from them in this whole situation.
Yeah, I think in the end, Bobby and Francis were probably the best
for each other.
Yeah, well, just not even in a relationship, but like the ones I could understand the most being friends.
Yeah.
Even though they were pretty toxic in the beginning because of Francis's
definitely
emotions.
better when they started up again.
Yeah.
And I think
they
that
had more
was
of an understanding and openness.
Yeah, now that I think about it, that's when Barbie started to warm up to me a little bit, because I was just like, okay, she's like not so high strung anymore. Like she's just like relaxing, you know?
Yeah. These characters are so interesting.
No,
I
they
feel
really
like you
are.
could dive into
Yeah,
each of them.
We're going over time right now. Like we can't say enough.
I know, true. There's so many things to
Did not expect to talk this much about this book.
Are there any other questions that you had?
Trying
to think.
I don't know. I mean, I bet I could think up one, but we're getting to that point where like I feel like we're gonna lose a lot of people if we keep going.
Right. Well, they already turned off at the very beginning when I again made a pun with the title.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. If you've listened this far, congrats. Honestly.
Yeah. I know that
I'm
was
surprised. Honestly, yeah. Comment down below what you guys thought about this book. Maybe who you would relate to the most, I guess.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting to see who people might have connected with. Because I feel like there's a lot of qualities that you can find in each of these characters that are just universally relatable in a sense, because it's just it's problems that everyone faces. And I think that's one of my favorite kind of novels to read.
Definitely.
Because I love just reading about real life and things. Like, this genuinely felt, like, made me forget that I was reading, in the sense I was like, this is just everyday problems. Like, I could imagine my friends coming to me and being like,
so this is what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, oh my gosh. Like, you know how you just kind of are there to like listen. You know, it's not the time to give advice because this person's not going to listen or whatever.
Yeah.
But you have all these thoughts and judgments maybe about certain things, but you're just like, all right, I'll see how this plays out.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I felt reading this, and it didn't even feel like a story.
Yeah.
Because
It
it's so
sucked,
realistic.
It sucked me in to the point where like I would like when Francis was having like a downward spiral at any given point in the book, like I was feeling it. I was just like, oh man, it's like this is rough.
Yeah. Can't suggest this book more.
Yeah. Honestly, yeah. I'm glad I got out of my comfort zone and read it.
Yeah. I highly, highly suggest it. Also, don't you hate when books put stickers on there?
Look at this.
I guess we'll end
So
with
tacky.
that.
So tacky.
Yeah.
Look at it says Hulu.
That's what we'll be watching it on.
Yep, and I don't have that service. So
That's embarrassing.
we should
So,
probably
tune in next week when Alex didn't watch it and I did, and we'll have a lot. I'll have a lot to say about it.
Yeah, and I won't have anything to say.
I am really excited
Me
about
too.
this. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye forever.